Hello, this is Carlos Martinez, and this presentation is in response for assignment Unit 5, conducting a chi-square test of independence. Course 605, Business Research Methodology and Quantitative Statistics, Dr. Nigel Basta's class at California Intercontinental University. Our agenda is as follows. I'll perform 3 chi-square tests of independence using PSPP, where one of those will produce a significant result. I'll state the hypothesis test, the rejection rule, and provide supporting details. Using PSPP, I'll conduct the chi-square test of independence, evaluate the output, and post takeaways and invite. Our first introductory page is just a couple of notes. Our testing is to test 2 measures between categorical values. The chi-square statistics, according to our textbook, is defined as associated with the degrees of freedom, which will reveal whether or not there's a significant relationship between 2 nominal variables. Also, the chi-square test of independence tells us whether being a member of one category is independent of the other. The degrees of freedom in our text is defined as n-1, where n is the number of cells and the columns and rows in our spreadsheet on our data. We'll use, as a final measure, Kramer's V. Kramer's V is a measure of association that allows comparison of the association across the tables that I will show next from 0 to 1, where 0 means the variables are not associated and 1 means the variables are perfectly associated in Kramer's V interpretation table. And here we have Kramer's V interpretations where 0 is interpreted as no relationship. There's no relationship to consider at all, whereas 1 is perfectly symmetric. The independent variable perfectly predicts the dependent variable. You'll notice another comment that says this is extremely rare, call your professor. Okay, our first chi-square test. It's the number of cars that the respondents own and the number of payment defaults relative to those. Our null hypothesis indicates that there's no relationship between the two, and the alternative hypothesis indicates that there is a relationship between the two, between the number of cars and the number of default payments that the respondents had. We're making an assumption that alpha is 0.05. Using PSPP, the formula here is based on the chart on the left are the data results, and plugging in those numbers, our Kramer's V number is 0.15. If you recall from the table, 0.15 indicates that there's no significant relationship to consider between the 2 variables. Therefore, we failed to reach the hypothesis. A second chi-square test is the Likert survey questions of the respondents of their financial comfort and the number of defaulted payments. Well, the null is that there's no relationship between those 2 variables, and the alternative hypothesis is that there is a relationship between the 2 variables. The Likert survey of financial comfort of the respondents and the number of default payments that the respondents had. Again, the assumption of alpha is 0.05. Here's the formula that I have plugged in from the PSPP results on the left. Our Kramer's V is 0.015. Really, it's the same as the first test. There's no significant relationship to consider between the two variables, so we failed to reject the null hypothesis. Our last test, the number of cars owned by the respondents and the linkered comfort level of their financial status, we found significant results. The null hypothesis is that there's no relationship between the two. Our alternative is that there is a relationship between the number of cars owned and the Likert survey of their comfort level regarding their finances. Again, the alpha is 0.05. The numbers are plugged in, as you can see from the PSPP results on the left. But here we have a Kramer's V of 1, which is rare. I should call the professor according to the interpretation table. We have perfectly symmetrical relationship. Therefore, we reject the null. The takeaways: the chi-square test of significance helps us to determine whether or not the two nominal variables are related. The degrees of freedom helps to determine whether or not there's a significant relation between the two nominal variables. PSPP is an excellent tool so that we will not need to perform manual calculations. Relatively easy to use. For me, I've used it a couple of times, and it becomes easier each time. Chi-square relationship is significant when the null is true, or not significant, but that's what we use when the null is true, as we've seen in the first two tests. I have included the two references that I've used, which is the video lecture from our video YouTube from our lecture and our textbook. Thank you very much for watching. Contact me if you have questions.